Good evening. Welcome to the council study session for March 11th, 2024, 6 p.m., City Council Chambers, 111 East Maple. And I believe, Councilmember Fears would like a moment of personal privilege.
I would like to welcome Scouts from Troop 1001, Blue Ridge Community of Christ Church, to our council study session tonight. They're working on probably citizenship in the community, if I had to make a guess. That's what they're working on, and so welcome, and be happy to answer any questions afterwards if you like. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And you must have been working on your swimming badges over the weekend, because I saw you at the Henley Pool on Saturday. Pardon me? Yeah. We did, but it was not on behavior issues, and we'll move on. Very good. Okay, that brings us to the discussion of the city charter, and Deputy City Manager, would you like to turn this over to Jeremy, or how would you like to proceed? Or just allow the council members to ask questions as we proceed? Does that sound good? I know you've got some questions. Some other folks have questions, obviously, so very, very good. Who would like to go first?
Well, I don't know that I have specific questions as much as I do general observations, in that I was hoping for fewer questions, and I was hoping for shorter verbiage under the questions. And so I don't know, if you might just summarize or have Lindsay summarize how you got to where you're at in terms of what you presented to us, and go from there.
Sure, I appreciate that. Jeremy Cover, City Councilor. This is Lindsay Kolish, Deputy City Councilor, and she, as you all are aware, has certainly been doing a significant amount of the work on the Charter Review project. I will tell you, I fundamentally agree with you. They are a little longer than I anticipated, and really where Lindsay and I ended up on that was this is difficult to take all of this information that we're talking about and boil it down to 5 or 6, relatively brief questions, right? And so what we ended up giving you all is longer than what I had originally expected. And what we decided was it was better to sort of give you this longer version and let you see that. And if the direction back is it needs to, we need to tighten this up, and whether that's each individual question and or fewer questions, we can certainly do that. But we wanted that direction to come from you all. So I'm going to let Lindsay address the fact that we still have 6 questions, which was a little different than I think the last discussion we had, and then we'll certainly take specific comments. But that's understood that again they're a little wordier than we maybe originally anticipated, and we can get those down some. So Lindsay, you want to address the 6 questions?
Sure. So when we write ballot questions, we want to make sure that everybody knows what we're talking about. When we write them, we want to make sure that everything is included in them. So what I did was literally go through my red and blue line copy and write each change and mark it off. And then where I could combine changes, like for example on question 2, to clarify provisions relating to the council's judgment of its members and the election of the mayor tempore. Those are all many sections combined into one provision. So I tried to do that where I could, where items were close together without changing the language of 2 terms really. And then I divided them each by the 3 questions that we had originally said would be articles, separate articles. And then the first question is things that are changed throughout the charter, so we don't need to put that gender-specific terms are replaced with gender-neutral terms in each article, or I'm sorry, in each question. And then question 5 is the sale of the public utility. Then so each question 2, 3, and 4 are all 3 or 4 sections of the charter that I think can be compressed a little bit more, but like Jeremy said, we wanted to show that these are the changes being made and we can make them more general, but also that there should be some specificity probably.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I understand that it had to be extremely difficult to take what was presented and narrow it down to specific questions and specific language in the questions. I guess my preference would be, because what I'm worried about is voter fatigue. And you start reading through the questions on a ballot, and you get through page 4 of the ballot, and they're just not going to read anymore, and they're just going to say heck with it, and not even vote at all. That's my concern. I'm not saying they will, but I'm saying that it would be my concern. And so, if we could, reduce the number, that would be great. And if we could reduce the language on it to any, that would be great. I'd like to see an attempt at that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
But I also understand that that's not an easy task. So that's my question.
No, not an easy task, but a doable task. Yeah. And so yeah, and like I said, I'm not surprised by that feedback. Even as Lindsay and I were working through this, we had those conversations, and in the end, we wanted to give this to you, and if that's the feedback, then that's we're good with that. Again, all of the as we've discussed before, just for the sake of transparency, all of the changes are going to be posted on the website, question by question, with all of the information. Right. But we are, obviously working within a very, limited window in terms of the actual ballot language. And so, yeah, I mean, your comment about voter fatigue, it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot that we're trying to accomplish in a relatively, small area with a small number of questions. So yeah, we can definitely compress this some more and have that ready to go for it would be the the plan right now, absent any direction to the contrary, is to have this to you all as an ordinance on your regular meeting for April 4th. So that's what we would be working towards, is taking that feedback tonight, making those changes, and then having that ready to go for a first reading next month. So yep, we can do that.
Well, that's my feedback. I don't know what the others think, but that's my feedback.
We can do that.
Mr. Coward.
Please proceed.
Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
So when do we have to actually have this? We're going to do the August ballot?
Correct.
So when do we have to actually have the ordinance ready to go into the election board?
It's actually not until May. This would need, absent a special meeting, this would need to be approved finally at the second meeting in May. So we have built in a buffer so that right now it's absent anything changing, it's scheduled to go on the 2 meetings in April. But technically, I think it's May 22nd. It's later in May that we would need to have this done for the August ballot. So technically, the May meetings are available. And when we discussed this at our initial work session that we had, generally the desire of the council was, at that time, was to have it, get to it sooner rather than later, and that way there was, as much time as possible to allow, to inform the public, to put out all the information, all of that. But technically, we have up until into May to get this finalized and put on the ballot.
Okay, thank you. So this is something I've been thinking about for a while now. Question number 6, we would, to get rid of independence power, or I'm sorry, to get rid of a public utility, we'd have to have a public vote. A couple of the departments that I'm concerned about being removed are the police department and the fire department as well. So I would actually like to see, I mean, there has been other cities that have attempted to get rid of their police department, and I'm not sure about the fire department, but I know that Blue Springs doesn't have a fire department because I think they went to Central Jackson County to start doing their coverage. So I'd like to see something put in question number 6, that if we got rid of the police department or the fire department for any reason, that would have to be a public vote as well. And I just wanted to get any thoughts from any council members on that. That's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, council member. Anyone thoughts on voting on fire and police and the question of that?
I'll
Please
chime
proceed.
in. I'm not really worried about it. If we were gonna do that, I would say we just either segregate those out and leave them in the charter, either in their own department area, or we just include those in the IPL question, which is in order to remove these from before the city manager or whatever. It just says you can't sell a public utility and you can't get rid of the police department or the fire department without a vote of the people.
I think that's what Councilmember Stewart is getting at, is basically adding police and fire to question number 6. Is that correct?
That would be correct. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to leaving them in the charter as well, but I would be fine with adding it to question number 6.
We don't need to have it in the charter if that's in there, because there wouldn't be any action that the city manager or council could take to make any changes to it. If there had to be a public vote before it could be changed or removed, it wouldn't matter if the charter says you have to have a police or fire department. If you have to have a public vote to disband it or remove
Right,
it or change
agreed.
it.
I mean, yeah, so
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Please proceed.
So one of the things we're trying to accomplish is to be sure that we keep the functions that are necessary for a city without putting ourselves in a place where we don't have any flexibility. I can't imagine this scenario, but say we decide that the very best thing that we could do for streamlined communication and coordination is to have an Office of Public Safety where we combined police and fire, you would be restricted from doing that by the charter if you must have an independent police department and an independent fire department. And I can't imagine that you would remove the function of fire or police, but there may be a mechanism where you combine them or call them something different, and we want to be sure that we preserve the flexibility for 20 to 30 years from now to be able to say, we use the functions, but use them in the best possible way. So I know change is terrifying, but I also want to keep that North Star of what we're trying to accomplish with updating the charter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Anyone else?
Mayor?
Please proceed.
I would, to dovetail with what Councilwoman McCandless was discussing, is actually the fear that a lot of citizens have. And I would say that if we keep the review of the city charter every 7 years, then as time progresses, that could be something that could be addressed and discussed in the future. But the scenario that you gave is the fear that I have and some of the citizens do have. That you would combine it into some kind of something else than what we have now.
Okay.
So just as clarification for myself, Councilmember, are you agreeing with Councilmember Stewart with regards to having it as an item that we would have it in the charter to say in order to eliminate those or combine them, it would be a vote of the people in order to do that?
Correct.
Okay, so you're agreeing with Councilmember Stewart?
Correct.
Okay. And that'd be I agree with you. That would be my wish, is to keep them in there, but we're certainly open for the discussion.
Sure. To follow up, if we move forward every 7 years, we can definitely reevaluate, and 20 years from now, if that is the wisdom of the Charter Review Commission at the time, then that's the proper course of action there.
Okay. Any objections to Councilmember Stewart's?
We're gonna be on that charter committee in 20 years, John.
I will not.
Councilmember Hobart, any other thoughts on that?
Not on that topic, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. And so if you could, I get a consensus that we're good with that, so we would add that language on in question number 6 as
Sure.
ited on it. If that's what I'm hearing you say, Councilmember Stewart.
That would be correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
And yes, that is generally at this point, that's the consensus that I'm picking up on. To be clear, obviously at this point, you all aren't voting on anything.
Right.
You'll have the opportunity to fully vet this. There'll be opportunity for public comment, certainly, at the council meetings when this is actually being considered. This is all just prep work to try to get us to a spot where those meetings and discussions can be as productive as possible. So based on generally what I'm hearing here, we'll adjust question number 6 to account for police and fire as well.
Anyone else, other thoughts on the questions as they were presented?
I'm just going to weigh in on this, just because.
Please.
To me, the idea of contracting out police or fire, either one, is so far-fetched in a city our size, I can't even fathom that. But, and so I don't I don't really see the need for that, and yet I understand the concern. I don't know. I have mixed emotions
Sure.
because part of what we're trying, like Councilmember McCandless said, we're trying to not constrain things so closely so that as time changes, we can't, adjust things the way we operate the city. But so I don't know. I understand the point. I don't have, a big concern about it, because I just don't see it even coming up. But at the same time, I'm not sure I feel a need for it. So
Sure.
I guess that's all.
Okay.
Mr.
Anyone
Mayor,
else?
I just want to be clear. I don't think it's going to become an issue either. But I also don't think Blue Springs thought they were going to contract their fire department out. So, I don't know. There's that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Anyone else, other questions on the items as they are presented? Please proceed.
So on Charter Amendment question number 2, it says about halfway down the paragraph, it says to remove provisions related to conduct of council members. And I understand that the idea is that those would be placed in a different section, but for the person voting on this, that's a little confusing. So I just, think about your wording there. It looks as though we can do whatever bad behavior we wish, and that is not what we're going for.
Yes, ma'am. That certainly isn't the intent. We can
Okay.
take a closer look at that one.
The other is just, I tried to imagine what my ballot looks like, and if you recall, it's half a page. So this is going to be 9 pages of ballot language on a national election. So I'm going to second what Councilmember Fears said about brevity. I think there are probably things in here that are more technical clarifications that are not substantive to the person making the choice.
Yeah.
So talk to me about how you go about paring this down. What would be your approach?
Well, I think it's exactly what you just said. I mean, there's a lot in here, and I think that there are some things that people are going to care more about than others. And so what we're going to do when Lindsay and I, work through this is gauge that. I mean, just generally speaking, not necessarily where someone falls on an issue, but is this an issue that garners attention, that people have a lot of, strong feelings about, that there's a lot of, discussion about, and if it is, well, then it needs to be listed in here. There's certainly more technical background, almost administrative items that, again, when you're doing what we're doing, are certainly important to the charter, but not necessarily important to citizens making the decision about whether or not, it's not going to really change. I would say not likely to change anyone's opinion. Yes, I'm going to vote for this or not. On some of these kind of minor administrative issues, and so that's what we'll do is we're going to try to pare those out again just from the ballot language to make it so that the things that people are reading and voting on are going to be the most significant, most impactful, the things that people are going to care, that we think generally people are going to have the strongest feelings about one way or the other, and that's what they're going to be reading on the actual ballot. Again, all of the information is going to be available to them, so they can read all the changes word for word. But that's how we're going to approach this. And we had already talked about that. Like I said, we wanted that direction to come from you all to say, yes, this is too much. We need to whittle this down, and we can do that.
My next thought is to acknowledge the comment that was made at the last city council meeting about, we have an increasingly diverse city. Not all councils have been representative. For a very long time, we had an all-male council that didn't recognize sort of the full diversity of the people who lived here. And since we've added a section on public engagement, being able to add a simple statement along the lines from the previous recommendation of when engaging community members, city officials should identify and proactively reach out to the diversity of the community. Something along those lines, if you could mock us up.
Sure.
So that we could read that and get a chance to review. And then that would be, I would think, included at the end of section 1, where it talks about council committees that include residents and stakeholders, departments, administrative, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Those were my 2 biggest concerns.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember, please proceed.
Thank you. Just for to be devil's advocate, what takes place if section 1 and 2 and the rest of it passes and the rest fails, or pick a combination?
Sure. Yeah, so that's, with those scenarios in mind, are why the questions are broken up the way they are, right? There are some issues that are spread sort of throughout the entire charter. Others are much more compact. And so what we've done with the way we've organized the questions is to essentially make them independent, so that yes, you could have, questions 1, 2, and 3 could pass, 4 and 5 could not, and then that's how the charter would be updated accordingly, and there are not any conflicting parts in there.
Makes sense.
To the best of our knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
One of the concerns that I have so far is that we have not had any community engagement yet. It was my anticipation that we would have a document and then present it to at least one community engagement scenario. Is there, since we don't have to be until what, May 20?
May 20, it's after the second meeting in May.
So are we able to build in at least one community engagement for that?
Councilmember, I agree with you completely, and I was actually looking at my calendar. I know when Councilmember Fears and myself met with Mr. Walker last week, that question was brought up. I was actually looking at something where we just have kind of an open forum and people can have the opportunity to come and speak about it prior to any of this being in framework, so that people do have the opportunity to share their thoughts and their ideas and look at the document. So I think he was recommending, if I'm correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, a Thursday evening.
We talked about a lot of different dates that day.
We did. I don't know what he recommended, but Councilmember, I agree with you. I'd like to do it as soon as possible to have people give us some feedback and get some sense of what voters feel and what's the sense of it. And I'd like to do it sooner than later, even though the document is not complete, but certainly get more feedback from folks and give them the opportunity to share their opinion. Even folks from the Charter Commission at that point give their thoughts. So, my question to the group is, how do we proceed? I'd like to do something as quick as March 21st or March 28th if folks are open to that, but I don't know if that's
think
too
we-
soon to have that kind of discussion.
We need to give some time for the changes that we've talked about tonight, of the
Okay.
consolidation and things, so we need to give a little time for that. And you may want time for feedback after that. I would envision, it would be helpful once we kind of land on those final languages to have some boards created, some storyboards created that say, here's the key points under each of the questions.
Okay.
For that kind of a meeting, so that people can have a chance to look at it and say, we can also have like the full copy, but it's gonna be real hard for people to go through that.
Sure.
So, if we can have some storyboards that say, here's the salient points of each of those aren't too hard to get made up, and, I think that'd be helpful. So,
Yeah, yes, we can do that. Let me ask you, are you all wanting to schedule that as you sit there, or are you saying find a date and make it happen? I just want to make sure we're
Yeah,
following along.
I don't want to give that kind of direction unless I've got, clear consensus from my colleagues to do that. I'd like to do something sooner than better.
Okay.
This is me speaking personally.
Sure.
Not speaking on behalf of the council by any stretch of the imagination, but even if we didn't have the document completed,
Yeah.
giving people the opportunity to at least give us their feedback at this point, what they like, don't like, things like that. But that might be too difficult and I'm not trying to be argumentative by any stretch of the imagination,
so I have an idea.
okay?
So, on Monday, April the 8th, Monday, April 1st, we are not meeting in council, that's, because that's election week.
Mhm.
What if we did it that night in place of, the council meeting?
Does that give you time for you to be able to work on if I'm hearing you correctly, Councilmember, give them time to work on the document, kind of get it up to a finalized phase, and be pretty
get some-
close?
And get some of those, bullet points,
Okay.
I'm just throwing that day out.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why we're having this discussion, to see if we can come to consensus on how we proceed with it. But I agree with you, Councilmember, I think it's extremely important from a sense of transparency, but also the discussion, and get a sense of where the flavor is.
It's April Fool's Day, I'm just bringing that up. I'm just saying.
Well, I won't say that.
So, let me ask this, with that date in mind of Monday, April 1st, so what we had talked about before was that this would have a first reading on Thursday, April 4th. Now, obviously, in order for that to happen, that packet comes out 10 days before that. So in other words, the packet would come out before this information session that we're having on the 1st.
Right.
Is that what you want, or do you want to push back the first reading, have the first reading on the April 15th meeting? That packet would go out on Friday, April 5th, which is after, again, the information session. Obviously, it's for you all. I mean, it's for everyone to kind of hear what's going on. But if there were, certainly, things that were either missed or have been reconsidered, we could make those updates between the 1st and the 5th. If that's what you want, I just want to make sure we're following along with whatever you all want. So fundamentally, the question is, do you want the packet to be out before or after your information session?
I don't, Mr. Cover, I don't think they're really not considering a, sit up here style of meeting. They're thinking of more of like a informational meeting.
Okay, sort of an open house?
Open house, mill about.
Okay.
With the public, put the questions on the board, get feedback, that kind of thing. Just sort of take the temperature.
Okay, the feedback's for you all. So I guess that's still,
Yeah.
then that makes sense. So the question still is, would you, with what we've got now, if we do this meeting on April 1st, do you want the first reading to be on Thursday, April 4th, or on Monday, April 15th?
I'll give you my opinion. Is I'd like to have the item in front of us in a written form. April 4th is fine with me if it's fine with other folks. I certainly don't want to speak for the council, but we're trying to move this along, and that allows us to move it along. But the other side of the coin is, too, we certainly want to get people's feedback, listen to the voters, find out what concerns they have, and if there's any issues that give them tremendous heartburn, then we have the opportunity to change it, because we could also do an amendment anytime.
You can do an amendment anytime, and certainly, again, we built in, a little bit of a
Right.
buffer here. So if you, decide, if you want to push it, the second reading back a meeting or something to give yourself some more time, we can, with the current schedule, you all can certainly do that.
Right.
So, okay, I've heard from the mayor, is that,
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, if we have it ready for the 4th,
okay,
if we get such information that we need to postpone it, then we can postpone it to the 15th. And that gives us time for a change, That's just my.
Yep. And just as a reminder, is it April 15th will be the swearing in of the new council members, is that correct? Okay, so just as a reminder for folks that we would have that ceremonial meeting there at that point too. Anyone else, other thoughts? But I thank you for bringing that up. I think it's an important key, and I think the more we get the chance to do listening sessions, people get a chance to tell us what their concerns are, and if we need to change things, we've got opportunities to do that. But I think your point well taken, Councilmember, is let's listen, let's hear what folks are saying, let's check the temperature, if I'm hearing you correctly.
That's it.
Okay. Perfect. And if you don't mind, and I don't mean to give Mr. Cover direction here, but really from my perspective, from the storyboards, you've already, I know you're going to condense these to a certain extent, but you could go with these right here, and that, because these are the major issues, the major items, and that would allow us to have a storyboard put together. Then we can put it up and then have people come and have a conversation at, wherever we have it.
Understood.
Sermon center,
yeah,
the municipal building,
yeah,
whatever.
We'll figure, we'll
Town
work on
market.
the logistics, we'll get
Right.
that figured out, but we'll plan on, Monday, April 1st, and on that evening, probably 6 PM, but we'll discuss that, make sure that there aren't any conflicts with that, and we'll,
And welcome people in to say, hey, what's your concerns? And we might, even if they have strong concerns, give them little dots and they can actually vote on them. I don't know if people have a concern like that. It would certainly get a sense of it.
yeah, we'll talk about that. So, yep, understood. We can do that.
Okay. Anyone else have thoughts? Okay. Councilmember, anything else? Mr. Cover, I have one area that I'd like to talk about, and it's not an issue of concern from the mayor, it's process. Selection of the judge for the municipal court. Summarize the process for me as it has been amended in this document. And if you need a moment to pull it up, you can certainly do that.
Give me
And
one
I'm
second.
not trying to put you on your toes or,
Let's see here.
Didn't we amend it so that we all just vote on the recommendation or the candidates that are submitted by the judicial committee?
yeah, but my concern, Mr. Hobart, is having a process every time there's a renewal. And I wanted some language in there if we have a renewal for a
It's every
judge.
4 years.
Right. So, but would you want 3 new candidates permitted, or every 4 years? Or give me your thoughts on that. I'm open for discussion.
Go ahead.
So right now, the process is the committee brings 3 nominees forward. The mayor picks the nominee, the mayor approves the nominee, the judge is seated. My understanding would be that this would be the 3 nominees are brought forward by the committee. The mayor can still make their top choice, but we should get the chance to vote on that top choice. And then if we vote it down, we come back to the panel and choose a different nominee from the panel. If we scrap the panel, you gotta start over. So,
Yeah.
Yes, that is what it is. And I think to the mayor's point, what's the additional language that's in there that has also been added. So yes, we have made that change to give the full council a say in that process. Also, what has been added in section 4.1, it says at the end of their term, a judge may be reappointed
by the mayor.
by the city council without initiating the nomination process. So
Thank you.
that's what's in there now based on the feedback that we received from you all previously, which gives you the option of if someone's term is up, that it's still coming to you all, but you don't have to go through the whole nomination process again. You can if you want to,
Right.
but it gives you the flexibility, and that's really what kind of the theme has been, is more flexibility to, if you've got someone and it's working, you all can reappoint that person without going through the full process again. So that's the current language that we are proposing.
So perhaps to the mayor's point, clarity around the nominees come forward and the mayor may make a recommendation that everybody votes on. Is that how it's written now?
Right now, it's the mayor shall appoint the municipal judge.
Okay, but for the modified language.
Yeah, the modified language says the mayor shall appoint and the city council shall approve.
Perfect, thank you.
That's the modified language essentially makes it more like a federal nominating process where he gets to, after going through the nomination process, the mayor makes an appointment, but it's subject to confirmation by you all. That's not currently in there. And so that's what the proposed language has. And then in addition to that, the change allowing that for that person, once they have served a term, to be reappointed again without going through the full nominating process if you want to.
Does that help? I like that process, that we bring it to the council, they vote on it, and at that point, we would, if that nominee is turned down by the council, that would trigger the whole process where we'd have the 3 nominations. You're not seeing it that way? How are you seeing it?
So you have your 3 nominees, the mayor makes their appointment, that person gets voted down. You still have 2 nominees that have been recommended. Do you have to start over, or can
No,
you
I
choose
think
another
the
one?
mayor meant if it was a person who had already served, correct?
Right.
Right. So you have a judge, they've already gone through the process, they've been appointed by the mayor, they've been confirmed by the council. If then to be reappointed, you all could do that. If that does not pass, if that person was not reappointed by you all, that would trigger the full process.
And that's my understanding, and that's my wish.
And
But
that's
wanna
how
make sure that-
how I read the proposed language.
But I want to make sure that all of our colleagues are good with it, and, I think that's a good compromise, but any thoughts from anyone? Good with that? Anybody any thoughts on that? I just want to clarify that from my perspective. I'm completely good with having the council address that concern, but my question is, precisely how does it work so that we've got that question clear and there's no, the last thing you want in a charter is fog.
Sure. Yeah.
We
So,
want
and
clarity.
it's section 4.1. So if you want an opportunity to look at it later, but yeah, those are the changes that have been proposed based on the whole process up to date. And I believe that it's clear to me what exactly would happen with any given scenario.
Right, because it's clear if we've got a candidate who was the judge and has resigned, or, whatever, we need to replace that.
Sure.
Obviously, that would trigger the entire process.
Agreed.
There's no question. And then we'd have 3 nominees, pick one, bring it to the council. But if it's just a renewal, we would bring that renewal to the council, as long as the mayor was good with it. That mayor then could appoint that person, bring it to the council if it's approved by a simple majority. Is that correct?
Correct. It doesn't say otherwise, and if it doesn't say otherwise, then it's a simple majority.
Right. Well, at least 4 votes, I would suspect. I mean, don't we have to have everything approved by 4 votes? It couldn't be approved by, let's say there's only 4 people here.
You're complicating it.
I am, but I want to clarify it.
There's no clarifying necessary, that's what he's saying.
Okay.
Right. Your rules are in place would account for any scenario
Okay.
with that reappointment. So I think the way the proposed language reads is clear, and to the best of my knowledge is consistent with what everyone is trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate it. And Mr. Cover, I appreciate your clarity on that, and I thank you for indulging the council on that question. But I want everybody to be in the room to have that discussion.
Sure thing.
Anything else? Please proceed.
One last thing, and that would be, Mr. Cover, once you all get this next draft of this, if you could go ahead and send it on out to us so we could look at it,
Yes, sir.
that would be helpful.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Anyone else, other thoughts, questions, comments, concerns about the charter? Please proceed.
Just briefly, and I'll ask Mr. Cover this because we have discussed it several times. We talked about using the term elected officials in the place of mayor and city council. Can you give me an update on that? Or
Sure.
give us an update?
Yeah, so there's about half a dozen places in the charter where it refers to mayor and council member, where technically it doesn't have to, right? Because obviously the mayor is a member of the council, and it says that, but there are a few, like I said, about half a dozen where it does, specify mayor and council, even though the functions are the same in those situations. And so, really there's sort of two options. If you're looking to clarify that issue, there's two options. One is to substitute out elected officials, or even elected or appointed official. I want to do appointed, but with elected officials to account for that. So in those scenarios, you would say elected officials, whatever, instead of mayor and council members. Another option is to just remove the reference to the mayor from those provisions, because again, per the charter, the mayor is a member of the council and is a council member. And so then if we just remove mayor, it just says council members this, council members that, and which it obviously does in lots of other places. So the fact that the mayor is separately listed in a half dozen spots, in certain places it's necessary given the different powers and functions. But there are about a half dozen spots where it's not necessary, it's just the way it was written. So we could certainly do either of those options. Still, so up to date, those changes haven't been made anything. You all, Lindsay and I have kind of worked through that, so we know where those spots are, if that's a change you're interested in.
I'd say, let's just remove the mayor then and just keep it a council member.
Yep.
That makes the most sense. That way we're not injecting
Sure.
a new
term. Yeah, and it really is, like I said, it's really, and it's done that way multiple places, other places throughout, where it's, referring to all of you. So I think that is a clean way to do it, and is consistent with where we are now. So we'll make those changes. So in where it doesn't make any difference, it will just say council members, and the mayor won't be specifically and separately called out.
Perfect.
Yep, we can do that.
Perfect.
Anyone else? Other questions, concerns about the charter? Everybody good to go to the next topic, next item? Anyone else? Okay. Then that'll bring us to the next discussion point. And Deputy City Manager, do you have any, lead us into this topic if you would please.
Sure. We have Bob Charlesworth from Charlesworth to speak on this topic. It's about our liability insurance for 2024 through 2025. So I'd like to introduce Bob to you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
And Bob, please proceed at your leisure.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Mayor and council members, my name is Bob Charlesworth. I'm Vice President of Charlesworth Consulting. I'm an independent risk management consultant. I've been with the city since 2018, and also served as your consultant for about 15 years back in the 90s. So this is my 40th year of this mess. So thanks for having me tonight. Tonight is a difficult subject to talk about. Several years ago, the city embarked on a liability program, and I'm going to take you through literally a 1-minute liability insurance 101 today to kind of prepare your brains for what we're looking at as far as risk transfer and risk assumption. So we're going to start that real quick here. That's myself, and of course we have Sarah White. She handles a lot of the workers' comp claims and some other claims that are filed with the city, coordinates that with your legal department, as well as outside counsel, as well as our claims administrator that has been approved by the city. This is a little, there we go. Real quickly, some of the key points of the liability program we put together. In a minute, you're going to see a number of liability limits. And one of the reasons we went this way is we encompassed all the liability risk, with the exception of some unique risk like drone liability and some other issues that are small in nature and unique. But what we've done, we have a general liability risk. It's a premises and operations. If you have a small business, it's people that come in and slip and fall on your property. If you, in the case of the city, if you're out mowing your yard or mowing the right of way, you throw a rock and hit a windshield, that's a legal liability under what we call a general liability policy. And we're going to talk about statutory provisions here in a minute. So as you can see, common claims, sewer backups, damage to roadways, mobile equipment, which are like lawnmowers, et cetera, if we break something or hurt something of somebody else's. So we have some defenses under the sovereign immunity statute in Missouri. And then we have to be found, we as a city have to be found grossly negligent to pay for that. So that is one key point of the general liability risk. The next one we have is called employment practices. The city's policy as it's currently written is kind of combined with the public official policy, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But this actually is very self-explanatory. Failure to hire, failure to promote, sexual harassment allegations. This is where this would fall under the employment practices liability definition. We have law enforcement liability. That's obviously for the acts of law enforcement officers within the scope of duties for the city. False arrest, wrongful use of force, et cetera. There are some immunities available to them if they are filed in a jurisdictional court. Sometimes they're filed in a federal court, and there's questions regarding the ability of sovereign immunity, so therefore liability comes into play, liability insurance. The other one is public official liability. You can use the mirror for yourself on this one. These are just errors that you may make as management. This also extends to management, not just yourselves, but city management and department directors, et cetera. So in their functions of duty, could be discrimination. Again, this would be not employee discrimination, discrimination to the public, et cetera. So those are filed obviously typically in a federal court of law where there are no immunities available typically. And then of course finally there's the auto liability risk. You know, when you ever use an auto, when you own it, you maintain it, or you use it in public roadways, you're subject to some of the statutory requirements, minimum requirements in the state of which you're in this case in Missouri, as well as any state of which you may operate that vehicle. And so it encompasses quite a bit for the city's liability, not only for your vehicles, but employees that may use their own vehicle within the scope of duties for the city. City could be brought in essentially on a vicarious basis. So you see the current liability program that the city purchases is with State's Risk Retention Group. It's a $10 million limit, and that, as my dad would say, would be guts, feathers, and all. So all the liability limits are under one program. And the reason we like this is that there are some allegations that could come down that could be a general liability risk, and it might entail an auto liability risk. We may have a law enforcement activity that may include an auto use. We may have some things that may commingle, if you will. So therefore, we like the idea of having all the liability, the major liabilities, under one program. That way, whatever the claim comes down, I don't want one insurer saying, oh, no, that's not us, and oh, the other one going, I don't want that, and finger point. It's all under one program, one retention. And when I say retention, think deductible. If you have a car, you wreck it, have a deductible of what you're responsible for. That's what a city has. Now, years ago, you were with an associational program called MOPERM. We actually have a quote to look at on that one. And your deductibles, retentions were fairly small. And when I say retentions, you need to understand one thing. A deductible under an insurance policy, the insurer usually handles it from dollar one. They settle the claim and they say, oh, by the way, your deductible is X for which you have to pay. So that's fine. Under a retention program, what happens here is that the city actually gets to control the claim. Now, we do have to notify, obviously, the carrier of claims that happen. Anything that's usually over 50% of the claim, we have to at least tell them that. So they're aware of what's going on. They know of our legal people, they know of our claims administrator, and they've approved all of those. So, but it gives the city the latitude to control the claims and how they're handled and how they're administered. Big deal. So when we embarked on this, the city embarked on this a few years ago, State's Risk Retention Group required a minimum retention of $150,000. That was our minimum requirement. But they said, we'll let you have to step up, I'll restate, $50,000 for the next 2 years. $200,000 the year after that, $250,000 the year after that. We have a summary of your summary here in just a minute we'll go through, so you can see that. But that was a requirement that you do that. Now, you may recall, before I get too far into this, when we started this process this last year, I was at the city council meeting last year when this was approved, and one of the questions was, did we look at higher deductibles? And the answer is yes, we did. The premium savings was extremely modest to go to a 500,000, 750,000, or $1 million. So it was like, there's no reason to transfer that risk, and there really wasn't a whole lot to save, so why would we do that? Therefore, that's why we recommend staying where we were. Well, if you're familiar with insurance companies and the industry trends and cyclical trends, we're in a really rough market right now. Liability-wise, it's just ugly. I'll put it that way. And this is the fourth cycle that I've been in my career, and it's probably the worst I've seen. So, what are the key factors? Well, obviously some of it's, every individual entity. Some of it is just the nature of the beast. And currently, across the United States, and this is not a reflection on you, so please don't take it this way, law enforcement has been literally bullied in the insurance market to take higher and higher retentions, more of the risk on their own activities. And it's nationwide. It's not just you, period. And so we're seeing that across I work in the Midwest. It's been very difficult to place. It used to be you could take that insurance separately, and we couldn't do that this time. We tried, and in a minute we're going to go through this, but you can see the timeline. We started back in September, working, what can we do, what are the options we can get into. We updated loss data. We keep that information always up to date. We met with your staff in February. We talked about going back to MOPERM. We talked about using Midwest Public Risk, which is a local associational trust, which the city has your city property insured with. Not the utility, just the city property. Do a great job with it. They looked at it as well. Candidly, you're too big. You're just not, you don't fit their mold. And so it's not to knock them, it's just you're just too big for what they need as far as the liability risk goes. But we looked at all these different issues, and of course we're coming up on a 4/1 deadline of renewal. Marketplace that we used, the city uses a brokerage firm called Lockton Companies, based here in Kansas City. They're probably the largest private brokerage house of insurance in the world. They're huge. So obviously there are larger firms out there that are publicly traded, but they are not. They're family owned. But we had them go out. We have a specialist that does nothing but public entities and power unit facilities. We went to Chubb. They declined anything. We were trying to stack limits on top of one insurer to the other to get to the current $10 million limit. They would only look at the above 5 limit, nothing else. And they really didn't want it because they already reinsure MOPERM, which, as we say, we looked at it, and they did provide a quote. Genesis, they are already the reinsurer for this risk retention group, so they didn't want to quote it on a direct basis, et cetera. We did get a quote from Old Republic, and we went to Safety National, who does your stop loss for your workers' comp, thinking that might be a good alternative to roll in with them since they know you. They declined, and they needed a higher retention than $1 million. So that was, and like I said, the pricing wasn't even in the ballpark. Travelers declined it. Again, this is not you, but Travelers, we work with them on other public entities of which we represent. They are just really difficult on the law enforcement risk. So, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, very sorry.
No, it's fine.
What's the power utility exposure?
Actually, the liability is fine.
What was Travelers' issue with it, though?
Oh, they don't like power units. They just don't like the liability associated with possible power units. Don't ask me why. I thought it was asinine, but that's just me. No, and that's not the problem. That's just the liability, and we've got very few claims under that. So I can't answer that for them. This is the approved carrier quotes that we received through Lockton. As you can see, I put the 2022-23, the expiring one, so you can see the premium progressions. Again, we'll see that here in a minute. States Risk Retention Group, just as an FYI, there's over, Cindy, I'm going to get this wrong. There's probably over 30 public entities that are in that. I know of 2 other public entities, large ones in Missouri that are in it. It's not Kansas City or St. Louis. I know a large one in Nebraska that is in it. And so it's really made for entities your size, and that was one of the reasons we went that way. Very good policy, all inclusive. Problem is that they mandated all their members. This is not singling out the city. They mandated all their members go to $1 million retention, period, or leave. So what we did, we said, okay, fine, we'll look at that. And as you can see, there's two options available for the city to look at. One is to remain at the $10 million level. The other is to say, you know what, premium-wise, we're just not seeing it. We're going to go down to the $5 million level. Same $1 million retention. And oh, by the way, they threw a wrinkle in there. Anything over $1 million, the city has to pay 10% of. So it's like a co-insurance, if you're familiar with property co-insurance. So we got, okay, fine, let's see what MoPerm can bring to the table. Well, MoPerm, yes, you need to be seated down when you look at this. $100,000 deductible, $250,000 auto liability, $500,000 law enforcement. Don't worry about the employee benefit liability. That's just miscommunication of employee benefits. But their premium was going to be $3,069,000. Just as an FYI, the single occurrence limit for 2024 under the Missouri Sovereign Immunity Statute is $3,370,137. So that's the worst case scenario in any one accident in Missouri. So you're pre-funding one massive, massive claim. They did have a $500,000 option for a modest $2.9 million. So candidly, that's not in the budget, and that's just not an option for me to look at, quite candidly. But it is something, that way you at least know what the market is looking at for you specifically. I went to Old Republic. All they would offer was $1 million with $1 million retention for $327,000. So when I walked into the management meeting that we had with your council, your deputy city manager, your finance director, and others, I made a statement that I probably should have never made, but I made it anyway. I'm not known for have much of a filter. I'm going, why are we buying this? And you should be asking the same thing. Why are we buying this? Well, obviously, the risk transfer piece of paper is important, believe it or not. It outlines the coverages, conditions, and reasons for defense. Instead of you all having to make a decision on, well, we're going to defend this or no, we're not going to defend this. It's a contractual program. And so it does bring value to the table. So that's fine. The other issue is that, well, if we do this for 1 year, at what level do we look at? But I'm going to tell you right now, and I've got another slide here in a minute, I'm going to preempt it. We're not going to sit on our laurels. We've got to do something different. When you look at some of these, it's like $1 million, $5 million limit, $1 million deductible, $1 million almost premium. It's like we're ended up for $2 million before we even see a claim. And so why are we doing this? And so there are methods to move to more self-funding levels. And of course, the industry changes every year. We didn't have a problem last year, but this year we did. And our claims aren't any different. They're typical. They have nothing strange. So the hope is maybe the market changes next year. My Ouija board is not that smart. But just to give you a history, this goes back to when the city went with states in 2019, went from 150, 200, 250, and we've been able to remain there, but the renewals are simply just very difficult, very difficult. Now, one thing that we've talked about with your city management team is, and this is from Bob Charlesworth, I don't make your decisions, you make your decisions. But I always say, if it were my company and my decision, what would I do? And I work with some very large public retirement systems. I work with some very large cities. And a lot of them are moving to the higher retention levels on purpose to get away from the day-to-day changing of dollars with insurance companies. So one of the items we looked at today, and I didn't actually get to visit with City Council about this yet, the City Legal Council, but I've gone through about every contract I've looked at, seeing are we violating any of our agreements with our vendors if we move to a $5 million limit versus a 10, and I haven't found any. We're still looking. I want to be very sure about that, but I don't see that as an issue. But again, just to be upfront, I just want to make sure. But if you lower the limit, you save about $200,000 in premium. You still have the piece of paper. You have an opportunity to continue to look at what else is out there regarding maybe the auto risk on a standalone basis. It's not easy to do with police vehicles, but it's possible. And of course, there's a statutory minimum requirement in Missouri for auto liability. So even if you decide to, quote, self-fund, we have to have that approved by the Department of Insurance in Missouri. So that's a process to go through. So there are solutions, but we're going to be forced into $1 million retention. And so what else can we do to go forward? Well, I want to see you move to a larger retention. That was the goal originally, was to maybe move to 500,000, then maybe a year or two after we build up maybe a reserve fund, a risk management reserve fund, that we can move to the higher retention without even a concern. Well, we're at decision-making time here in the next week. So what we're looking at is moving possibly to a lower limit, accepting the $1 million retention and the co-insurance, keeping the premium about same as to what the city is currently paying. And then looking forward, we've got to aggressively maybe just carve out the general liability, which is a very modest risk for the city, by the way. Yeah, you have some statutory provisions that you could be subject to for dangerous conditions, et cetera. But the city's history has been pretty light on general liability claims. Consider truly self-funding the law enforcement and public official and employment practices risk, just saying we're just not going to buy that anymore. We're going to truly self-fund that. We're going to manage that. Our claims history shows that we can manage that. And so we're just not going to spend the extra money for that. But we will come up with an internal policy on how we're going to administer that. Because that way, city council and your legal counsel knows how to defend something. That way, you all have some confidence how this can be managed. That's what we're looking for. Again, we've used Lockton to approach everybody that they're familiar with, that I'm familiar with, and these are the best results that we have for you to look at. Now, once you take a breath, are there questions that I can answer tonight, or are there things you want me to pursue or look into?
Thank you. Certainly, we will want to have more discussions with our city manager about what processes we would need to be able to move to a more self-insured arrangement. Obviously, we've made a little bit of financial improvement in our bottom line, but this would be additional segregated money that we would need to put into a risk pool for ourselves. So there are choices that we're going to have to make in that. I'd like to clarify just a few things, that it is not our claims history that is driving this premium increase. This is a change in the marketplace, and you're seeing it across municipalities. Am I clear about that?
That is correct.
Okay.
And again, I want to reiterate, with State's Risk Retention Group, every member has to go to the $1 million retention, period.
So this is a sea change across all public insurance
That is
risk
correct.
pools. Okay.
And we did try to carve out the law enforcement just to say, just move this out, and thinking, well, if the industry is saying it's a law enforcement risk, let's just do something different with it. And my belief is that the carriers were going, there's too much that could be brought in for a law enforcement activity, specifically use of an auto in a pursuit or whatever. So are we going to get drug in for a law enforcement activity of which we are not charging a premium for? And so they're very reluctant to do stuff like that.
So whenever I've been faced with super duper premium increases like this at my previous corporation, there's a lot of soul searching on the side of the corporate executives. What do we need to do for risk mitigation? What are pieces that we need to put in place to change our side of the equation. So I'm curious, having worked with us for a while, are you seeing us make those sorts of administrative progress, changes that we need to in our policies and our practices that put us in a better stead?
Oh, I think you have, and that's coming from an outside looking in. There's no question that there's always improvement opportunities elsewhere, but I think the education of your staff, they've been extremely good to work with, by the way, and getting information to go to these insurance companies. They've been on top of our request on every question that we've come back with from underwriting. Fabulous to work with. And so it's good information. It's solid information. Some of the risk mitigation that we came up with your city management team, I mean, more HR practices that, you know, we've had some hiccups off and on. Good training. Our policies and procedures, I mean, when you look at law enforcement, that's the first question they ask. I want a copy of the law enforcement procedures. And they have been accepted. And so there's good things that are happening. Are there other ideas that they could bring up? Absolutely. And I think those will continue to develop. And as we see claims and have claim meetings, which we have quarterly, we can kind of go through what's trending, what's not trending. Are there certain departments that need a little more help? A while back, we were looking at driver training on a specific department, small department, but they had a lot of little auto accidents. Nothing financially devastating at all. But it's just like, you know, I'm out there trying to find people that will do driver training in those actual vehicles. Will they come out and shadow somebody, like a truck driver would go out and qualifying for driving a semi-truck. And I've had a hard time trying to find somebody to come out and do that. I can't. I mean, I'm pretty good at driving. So I'm a risk manager that drives race cars. Figure that one out, okay? But no more. I've got out of that business. But I understand driving instructions and stuff like that, but I think somebody needs to understand how these specific units work and the size of some of these units and things that can help them do a better job internally in the department. So there's things like that are still ongoing that are part of our monthly conversations with city management.
Are there choices or advice that you have gleaned from other municipalities as they are facing these sorts of shocking increases? Are there anything that we can learn from your other clients?
Oh, I wish I could answer that better. Your size in the metropolitan area is much different. It's larger than a lot of ones that we work with. We work with several on the Kansas side and in the metro area, and they're just not your size. And it's not really that much different, but they are forced to hire retentions already as well. Now, I will say Kansas has a different tort limit than you all have, but we've had several in Kansas that have gone to a $500,000 retention, and that's the tort limit, by the way. So the others are being, I don't want to say forced, but they're highly encouraged to go that way, to the point where they're not offering, the prices are just astronomical to stay where they're at. So they've got to move that way.
Okay. And then my final question is that the world is definitely seeing more in the realm of cyber risk at every level, every department, every type of transaction.
Correct.
I assume that is baked into our general liability, or do we carry a separate cyber policy?
There's a separate cyber policy. It is on your consent agenda coming up. It's a separate, I think it's Beasley that handles it. Very good insurance company. I think the premium's $54,000 a year, something like that. So it's over the, city management authority. So obviously it's brought to you for information purposes. But I think that's going to be on the agenda for consent. But yes, that is a separate program altogether.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Anyone else, other questions? Please proceed.
Well, Councilmember Camlis asked several questions that I had. So, as usual, we're on the same wavelength. What is our statutory limit in Missouri now?
It is. I do have that. Just give me a second. For 2024, the per person in a single occurrence is $505,520. The most per single occurrence, so it would be multiple people, is $3,370,137. It changes every year.
Okay. That's helpful. I'm not sure. So basically, just to make sure I understood your answer, Councilmember McCandless, on this is essentially you're not seeing where insurance companies are coming back saying, well, if you made this operational change or this policy change, we could cover in a different way, or we could change our coverage, or we could offer more coverage, or whatever. You're not seeing anything like that. This is just essentially a general issue that all municipalities are affected by.
I hate to use the word all, but yeah, a bunch do.
Right.
We did not get any insurance company come back and says, if they change this policy or procedure for this department, we're in. We didn't get that. And I would think at this kind of premium level, that might have been a little bit encouraging.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering, yeah.
So
Okay.
I wish I had a better answer for you, but I do not.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. All right, thank you.
Anyone else, other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
they ever show you any claims data?
I have claims data.
So have they gone up enough to justify the premium increase?
Can I answer that or not? In my mind,
we're just reaching prime tort reform. They've finally done it, haven't they? The burden has shifted completely.
the burden has shifted. And
That's why they don't care about policies. That's why they don't care about any details, right? I mean, really.
I still think there are carriers out there that really do care. And, obviously, if you look at the Travelers and some of these, they're for-profit companies. They want to make some money.
Well, yeah. The only way they make money is by not paying claims. The only way you don't pay claims is by not covering incidents.
Not covering or setting high retentions or setting high reserves.
Correct.
And then that hurts your loss experience because it shows a bigger number that could be artificial.
Oh, right. Burden shifting.
So, I call that pencil whipping where I come from. And I don't want to rag on the insurance companies, per se. Because
Doesn't bother me any.
Okay, that's good. They've been thumped, but there's other areas they haven't been thumped, and they're still passing on increases to their clients.
They're not all out of business, so I say they're doing all right.
Yeah.
To add to what Mr. Charlesworth has already said, there are certainly things we can do that we are doing to help mitigate, right? We're going to do everything we can, but these are big picture shifts. Also, again, given our size, our options are going to be more limited than some other smaller municipalities. There's a number of carriers and programs that just, as one of the slides illustrated, that just aren't equipped to handle our size of program policy, and the claims that go with that just inherently. So some of this we just can't change. It's just a fact of who we are and the shifts in the market, and we're just trying to do what we can to address that. But to the extent there are any sorts of tweaks, policies, things that best practices, obviously we're going to incorporate those and make those a part of our practices. But in the big picture, that's not what the issue is. This is just a fundamental shift in the market, and we're having to adapt to it.
And as the shift moves back a different way, we'll be ready to, utilize the benefit of that, and we won't be caught not ready, for those changes and be able to utilize the benefit of them.
Yeah, I truly do believe the city is going to be ripe for having a risk management fund, legal liability defense fund, wherever you want to call it, that can be created and monitored and budgeted Instead of budgeting X amount for insurance, we can budget, and we budget for claims, by the way. It's part of the budget process. And we did increase claim costs this year going forward to account for what I believe, and I'm not an actuary, but for what I believe is going to be a correct number to fund for claims that have happened that we're going to try and settle throughout the year. And so those dollars are there, and they've been good over the years. So I'm not seeing what the heck happened. And, if we look back at the city's claims and what's been paid, between the 250 and the million is not a lot. So it's frustrating.
No, I very much appreciate it. No, I'm not criticizing the city or you or your work. No, this is well beyond any of our control or capability. It would be beyond us if we were Kansas City. These are bigger issues with deeper pockets than random cities have.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm criticizing.
Yeah.
It's regardless.
Well, I think this is an indication where the city needs to be.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
And to me, it's the wake up bell that unfortunately we're hearing. Not that we weren't awake, but that it's time to make moves.
Well,
And so
with change comes opportunity, right?
that's absolutely
So
correct.
we'll find the best, most efficient way to do this, because we have bright, good people working here that care, and we'll come out on the better for it.
Yeah.
That's what we'll do.
Anyone else? I don't know who this question would be good for, or if this question is even out of bounds and beyond the scope of this discussion tonight. But if we were to, what I'm hearing you say, Mr. Charlesworth, is that we need to go to more of accepting more risk ourselves and adjusting that for the policy premiums.
Yes, sir.
That's the whole argument.
Yes, sir.
My question is, what are the best practices for cities to do as they go through that process to shift that risk and accept more of it and reserve for it and budget for it?
We help you with that. We have risk management reserve policies and fund policies that we've helped develop for other clients, and of how to do that. And that way, it's very clear. And obviously, we would go through City Council for approval to see how those funds are generated, how they're maintained, and they're earmarked. And so there's a reason to have dollars in there, and then that way they carry over. Mm-hmm. So don't spend them at the end of the year and just start from zero again every year. Right. So there's some parameters that we have to work out logistically on that, and we'll help you do that. Yeah, that's part of our job.
Okay. Anyone else? Other questions? Yeah, I certainly won't take the council's time but I think this would be a good. I certainly would like to delve into this more to know what's kind of the process.
Yep.
So that we feel comfortable with the decision, and not to question you at all. I'm not saying that, but
no, that's fine. I
so we've
appreciate
got the
that.
knowledge to say, hey, we feel comfortable making.
Well,
this
I think
decision
that's part
forward.
of the game plan for next year already. We're going to lay it all out, and then y'all can decide to do that or not. And the market may change, and
You will. It'll get worse.
yeah, we do. And so I think, to me, this is the year to lay it out, and then that way we have and with Lockton as the city's broker, once we give them that direction, they can work with the markets to move us that way. And so that might be a better marketing tool for them to find out those alternatives for catastrophic issues. But I still want to double check the limit provisions, but I do want to do that. And I've done that, but there's probably a few I haven't seen yet, and it's just, I didn't even tell your city management about that yet. I thought about that driving here tonight. I'm going, I've seen all those, but did I see them all? So I just want to make sure.
Thank you. Anyone else? Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Charles,
Thanks for having
being
me.
here.
Appreciate it
I appreciate
very
your time.
I'll be here on Monday as well next week if you have any other questions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Other questions on this issue? Any other items? Deputy City Manager, any follow-up questions or ideas, things we need to cover before we adjourn this meeting?
Nothing further from us.
Very good. All right, with that, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.